hell yeah. Let's just start it with the drink bell.
Okay.
I'm just going to start it with a... Drink bell. It's back, folks.
It's back in Technicolor.
If you didn't know from before, or you also aren't very good at using context clues, we ring the bell when we get a drink. Not as relevant on video because you can see it.
You can see it, but it feels good.
For our audio listeners, if you couldn't tell, I don't know, it's just fun because even the audio listeners can tell from the can opening.
We're making it inclusionary. It's really the goal here, which is nice. You know, how do you make a video podcast that's still good for audio listeners? It's like this. Video people can see me swatting at a fly.
You do it with your buttery radio voice.
This is Anthony Vizzini for Not NPR.
Yeah, I don't have a buttery radio voice. I'm sorry, folks. But welcome back to our now third episode on video. This will be 103.
Yeah, I think so.
Episode 103. And we're going to do a special Maker Hangs edition where we don't actually have a guest. Anthony is our guest. And he is going to be doing our Maker Hangs. For those of you who don't know, Anthony Vizzini is from Huntsville, Alabama. He makes cabinets. He's got a business called Wood and Plain. Wood and Plain Custom Cabinetry. Formerly Wood and Plain Carpentry and Design.
Yeah. It's
always going to be Wood and Plain. Subtext, we'll figure out what we
he's changing.
Like. Yeah. I like custom cabinetry, though.
I do, too.
Right now.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to... I actually reached out to my guy who did my logos because I want to update the logos. I want custom cabinetry in there, but then it makes my logos kind of screwy. So I'm like, I need to figure out a way to balance it out to make it still visually the same because I really like the logo design. So we're working on that.
Have you ever gotten onto like a graphic design algorithm where it'll go through like Photoshop?
Oh, yeah.
And they'll do an outline of a shape and be like, that's actually not precise. The way to do that is, and then they go through all the different tools.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a more perfect, more pleasing.
I love the Adobe suite of tools, Illustrator and Photoshop.
Yeah.
I got pretty proficient with Photoshop back in the day, but Illustrator's always somewhat eluded me. But
I need it because now that I'm doing YouTube, I'm doing thumbnails and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just getting on like the free Canva.
Nice.
And just downloading my image before it asks me to like sign up for a free trial.
There you go.
It works, but it's not super powerful. But so let's get to know Anthony. I know a lot of our listeners know both of us pretty well at this point if you've been listening for a long time. But we're aiming to bring in a new audience with this new push, with this video, with just a little more effort into everything. So we're going to get to know Anthony and maybe get to know me at some point.
Maybe.
So how long you been doing it? Tell me your story. You got started. Not super interested in what you did when you were 6 or 8 years old, but you know, you've done a few Maker Hangs. You know what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Give me a little.
So, like normally I'd say long story short, but I think the point is to make this short story long for this episode. So
I was thinking about it on the way here. I was like, at this point, honestly, I could fill a total hour just talking about my journey.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could too.
Yeah.
Just because we've done it so many times. We talk about it so much in conversation. It's almost like a elongated elevator pitch. You can kind of make it as long or short as you want it, which is good because anytime you're stuck in a position where you need to make any kind of conversation, it's hard to make it not super self-centered if you take this route.
Yeah.
But just kind of tell your whole story.
I almost think it'd be funny if I interviewed you as me and you gave the Wood and Plain story, and then next week I gave the Johnson Company Woodworking story.
Ooh.
I don't know. But anyways.
You want to do it?
I'll let you get started with it. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Hi, I'm the host of Splinters N Stuff, Anthony Vizzini.
I don't know if I can really take your persona, but let me tell your story.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let you give the condensed history.
Yeah.
Like the 3 minute version.
Yep.
Okay. So
right, gotcha.
I'm Anthony
and then
Vizzini.
this will let everybody know how well we know each other because
right.
I might just have a lot of stuff wrong and you're like, that's actually not at all how it happened.
Let me stop you at the end and say there were no dinosaurs involved, but I like the thought.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Hi, I'm Anthony Vizzini for Splinters N Stuff podcast. I'm joined by my fabulous guest, fake Anthony Vizzini. who's here with...
It's actually pronounced Vizzini.
Oh, that's...
Vizzini.
We're off to a good start.
You gotta
We're off
do
to a
that.
good start. Yes,
I will say Siri gets it right. When Siri
Does
reads
she?
your name to me, she says Anthony Vizzini.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So you started Wood and Plane some years ago. Can you tell me kind of how you got into that?
Yeah, let me back you up a couple years. So just a little bit on my background. So I graduated Mississippi State with an undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering, and then went on to Arizona State to get my master's.
I heard that's a big party school.
It is. I did have an extra year. Let me tell you, I leaned into the party scene hard. I really did.
That makes sense.
But had a blast, still got it done, got my degree. And then in the beautiful city of Huntsville, Alabama, it is a great place to be an engineer. So I worked my way up through the ranks in engineering, learning a ton about the industry and people management and engineering as a whole. And there's actually a lot of that will transfer over into your day-to-day life as a small business owner. A lot more than I would have expected, right?
Yeah.
So years ago, I'm fuzzy on the years. I'm bad with dates. But years ago, I had an aspiration to build or renovate or something, almost an entire house. Either build a new house or pick up a flip that's basically just bones.
Yeah.
And then I was going to learn how to do everything along the way.
Oh.
Figure that out, do kind of the live-in flip thing,
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
It turned out to be a lot more work than I anticipated.
Some people go into those thinking it'll only take 6 months.
Yeah, ultimately it took about 5 years. And I will say you run into some problems when you live in the house that you're flipping.
Oh, sure.
Because then you've got rooms off limits. Everything is a mess all the time. First, we had to have a shop to even work out of.
Yeah.
So we converted the carport to a garage.
Yep.
So
Makes
the point
sense.
I'm making here is basically I put myself in a trial by fire to figure out how to build, how to do construction, how to make. I always had an interest in woodworking, and this sort of translated into that. Once I got the house in good enough shape where it started to move a little bit slower, I was kind of taking one room at a time, and there were several 6-month spans that we didn't really put any work into the house.
Yeah.
So then I got into woodworking and just kind of started tinkering here and there. At some point in the renovation process, I actually lost my job. I was part of a big layoff. It happens. We're working with big companies that have thousands of employees. Layoffs happen. And
Sure.
even if you're good, they might axe you.
Yeah. I mean, someone would say that you were the best.
I don't like to toot my own horn.
Yeah.
But
sure.
I was good at my job and was thoroughly caught by surprise that I didn't make it through that round of layoffs. But that's their loss.
I would agree. Yeah.
So I started picking up odds and ends things, building for friends and family, and just really decided that just really kind of fell in love with creating, with making things, whether it was your typical, hardwood furniture type deal, cabinets. It was just kind of everything at that point. Quickly, I realized I wanted to turn it into a business. It's kind of always been a thing for me, selling candy on the school bus and stuff like that. I've just always kind of had that entrepreneurial itch inside me.
I understand that. Yeah.
So when I realized how much I really enjoyed making these things, I thought, hey, let's pursue this.
Okay.
So I did.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Started working on it, and things quickly picked up.
Yeah.
As soon as everybody found out that Anthony Vizzini was building stuff for people, there was a line out the door, buddy.
Nice.
Yeah. So still working full-time as an engineer at this point.
Yeah.
Everything I got totally covered up.
Sure.
Got to the point where I was like, okay, I've got a couple of options here. If I keep pursuing this engineering career, I'm not going to have enough time to pursue this other business. So then comes time to get an employee, right?
Yeah.
So that was my solution. Instead of trying to work my way out of engineering at that moment, I did some math, figured out I could pick up an employee, sort of manage the business in my off time from my engineering job, because I was working remote. This all happened kind of during COVID and the fallout, so that worked out well. Was able to kind of manage wood and plane, which is what I decided to call the business because I'm an aerospace engineer, and it's not like a hand plane; it's like an airplane.
Wait, now that you mention it, it kind of sounds like wooden plane, like an airplane.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clever.
Right.
Very
right.
clever.
And actually, if you look into my branding,
Uh-huh.
you can actually see a lot of it. I don't think I have anything with any branding on it with me. But
Wait a second. I've got one of your hats right here.
Oh, dope.
Thanks for supporting. You can kind of see right there how it looks like.
Kind of see how the middle looks like a
aviation.
prop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so clever.
Yeah. I'm going to let you take over. This is exhausting.
You're doing such a good job. Okay. All right. I'll take over. First of all, I'm incredibly flattered that you've retained that amount of information, but everything's pretty much been spot on.
I'm going to be real upset when you do mine and don't know anything.
So I worked in space and the final frontier.
I went to college.
I went to college.
And then I had a job, and then I started a furniture business.
And then I grind.
Grind set.
Yeah. Okay. So no, you kind of you went through all the fun parts. Then we got to like the less fun parts where after being covered up, I did jump ship and went full time with Wood and Plane. And the day I did that, it was like, the day you buy or sell a boat. Just very exciting, big shift. And it wasn't terrifying. It's something I've been warming up to for some time. I kind of had an exit plan from my job as an engineer to full time with Wood and Plane.
Let me jump in and interject to get into the weeds a little bit.
Sure.
What sort of preparations did you make, and how long did they take? A lot of people talk about, saving up a nest egg or something like that. Personally, I had several boxes that I needed to check before I could go in and put in that notice. Sort of what was your checklist there, and kind of how long?
Oh man.
From developing the checklist to checking everything off, what did you have into it?
It was probably like a year from developing the checklist, and I don't think I checked everything. I'm sure I didn't check everything off from that checklist. Some of it was having enough money set aside. Some of it was having the house that I was living at in a certain condition, having the shop in a certain condition, having my revenue at a certain point. And I don't think I hit any of those.
Yeah, they get gray.
They got gray.
Those checklist goals start to get a little muddied, and you go, that's good enough.
I was ready to leave one job, and then when I was kind of had enough and was just about to pull the trigger anyways, just and say like, screw it. It was just a really odd situation at the job I was at. It was during COVID, so it was just a really weird situation of telework and this and that, which was great in a lot of ways and also difficult in other ways, as I'm sure it was for everybody. I got offered a different job, and I took that job because they were going to pay me like 15% more than what I was making before. And it was a 1-year contract. So at that point I was kind of like, that's my guide. I'm going to make a little bit more money. I can put some more money away. With that money, I can hire an employee. And, after 1 year, I will spend that year doing whatever I think I need to do to kind of prep myself for being.
So you could hire an employee on 15% of what your salary was, is what you're saying? Use that extra money to hire? You're starting to sound like every other CEO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was more than the 15%.
Sorry,
no, that was good. I just did the math, and I was like, it was significantly more than 15% of my salary to hire Mac. That's funny though. Yeah, so I was like, I've got the year, and I'm going to spend at the end of that year, I'm just going to kind of just do it. You can't, it was like 2 marriages. Like you can't, I'm not the kind of guy who can have 2 families successfully, Yeah. And so
Did you have any external pushes? Was there anybody on the outside being like, hey, you should do it right now?
Luke Johnson with Johnson Company Woodworking told me every day to quit my job for years. Which kind of made it fun, but it was good to have someone to push. I didn't really have any naysayers as much as I thought that there might be people who like wouldn't naysay, but like kept that opinion to themselves, which is also fine. Like that works for me. If you get nothing nice to say, unless you're really worried that I'm about to make a terrible decision, which no, I don't think anyone thought that. I think there were people who were like, well, that's going to be a big change, you know?
People talk about the naysayers a lot, and I was kind of the same way. I didn't really have any. There were a few people who were like, oh, maybe you should just try it. Like maybe go part-time at your job instead of full quitting and stuff like that. But those were always people who weren't really apprised of the full situation. They didn't know everything that was going on. Sure. They didn't know, they didn't know what money was coming in. They don't have enough details to really make that call. That's just kind of their gut cautious reaction. But I feel like you get all these entrepreneurs that are like, everybody told me I couldn't do this. And you got to block those people out. If you believe in yourself, you got to do it, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, it's so much more nuanced than both of those sides, you know?
Right. But I was kind of in the same boat as you. I didn't have a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't know. I don't really know what all that has to do with. Maybe just the people who are in your life. But if you present a good plan, even if there is a naysayer, if you've got a good plan, you can kind of back up anything that they say. Well, what if this happens? Well, I've already accounted for that.
And I think you and I are fortunate enough to surround ourselves with some good people. I think you and I aren't a couple of dummies. I think that you and I have been successful in other things that we've done enough times to say that where people go, well, if they think it's a good idea, they must have some reason to believe that. And they seem like the kind of guys who have done their homework. A lot of people will be wrong about that. I mean, it was, so yeah.
I do my homework on this stuff the same way I did my homework in school. Yeah. Like at the very last second possible. And if I can get out of it, I will.
I mean, so I kind of gave myself that year and I hit the end of the year, bing. And I was getting close to the end of the year, and then that job was like, wow, you're sure doing a great job here. We'd like to extend your contract and move you up within this organization. And I was like, oh no. And so this happened about 3 months prior to when the contract was supposed to end. And I went and I came home and I talked to Sam about it, and I was my fiance now. And I said, I think this is it. I was like, if I do this, it's going to take up way more time. They'll probably pay me more, which will be great. But like, by this point, I had the plan. I'm, 9 months into it. And I was looking at the door at the other end going like, I'm going to walk through that door.
Did they say what the extension was? How long it was?
No, it was just like no, they didn't. It was just,
we're going to take you off of a 1 year timeline and put you indefinite.
Yeah, kind of, pretty much, something like that.
Yeah, so I think it's really good that you had that plan, because if you hadn't already decided that and then they hit you with that could have been 3 more years before you. It could have been so good.
Yeah, that and realistically,
golden handcuffs.
This job wasn't one that I was particularly excited about. I mean, it was a good job, and I was back in an office that I used to work at, so a lot of familiar faces. It was a very cozy environment. It was actually the first office. It was at the office that I had my first job out of school at. So it was cool to kind of come back like 10 years later and see a lot of the same people who were all happy to see me again. They kind of knew what I was about, but also like knew that I was capable of more at this point. So it was a really nice situation that worked out. I was like, here's a kind of I wouldn't call it cushy, but cozy job to do. Comfortable job to do.
You got a master's in engineering. You're not. People with a master's in engineering don't have to work incredibly hard to make a living.
yeah, sure, exactly. So it was a good spot for a year, but then kind of 9 months in, they were like, "Hey, we're gonna give you this role instead." And I felt bad. I went into the office. I called my contract supervisor and I was like, "Hey, do you know what's going on with this?" He's like, "Oh yeah, that's great." I was like, "I hate to tell you this." I've been looking at this as a 1 year thing. Like I wasn't planning on necessarily renewing. I've got this other thing I'm going to do. And I think I need to go ahead and just do that. I'm going to put my 2 weeks in. And then everyone couldn't have been happier for me. It was, which, I guess makes sense looking back. Like that's how I would treat somebody if they did that, and, but it's just nice that like, I was worried that I was going to let them down. I was worried I was going to let my family down. I was the biggest one holding me back from it. But I'm glad I was reserved. I would have been in a lot worse spot if I had just jumped in as soon as I had the idea.
Sure.
now I could have set myself up way more than I did. But it was a combination of kind of leaving things early. I didn't check all the boxes that I wanted to, but there was no way to it was kind of a shit or get off the pot kind of situation.
Yeah. There's something to be said with the risk management or lack thereof that sometimes you have to be able to do that. It's like, okay, I've checked a couple of boxes. My nest egg is, I don't know, 75% of what I wanted it to be. Okay, that just means I got to be a little more sure about what I'm doing when I'm doing it. But that stuff, like I said, that stuff gets a little muddied, and I think it's good, honestly, to be able to go, I'm going to figure that stuff out. I'm going to figure that out. I will cross that bridge when I get there, instead of getting caught up in the paralysis by analysis of, and never pulling the trigger. So I think you have to have a little bit of that in you, is like, the kind of, fuck it, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, so here are the things I did accomplish. One, I had an employee. Two, I needed more space for my shop, and so I bought the property we're at now. That enabled me to start working and getting out of the other house. But what I was able to do was refinance the other house. So that gave me a big kind of lump sum of cash to kind of work from the get-go.
That was kind of the big bow on your flip.
Yeah.
That was kind of the point where, okay, this, for all intents and purposes, this flip is complete.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and have it reappraised, refinance, pull out the equity that I built in it so I can use that
to fund my venture, basically.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it wasn't like it was completely unchecked. It was just a little bit earlier than I had hoped. And so I just wasn't kind of mentally all the way there yet. But once that kind of forcing function happened of the offering of another position, it kind of just all fell into place. And I just saw it. And I was just like, yep, this is it. This is time. This is the moment you do it.
Was that year contract, obviously you're thinking about work. You're doing work, the engineering work.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I feel like, at least for me, more of my mental bandwidth throughout the work week as well as the nights and weekends, I was more thinking about my own thing, thinking about the venture that I was going to take.
Sure.
You would kind of think that year would be a really long year.
It was.
Because there's this crazy thing at the end of it. For me, it was a little bit more like I didn't have enough time. Like I had a timeline I wanted to do it on, and I had that checklist, but that timeline flew. And it was like all of a sudden I'm 2 or 3 months out and I haven't checked all the boxes I wanted to check. And it was like I said, outside looking in, you would think that would be that would feel like a very long year.
Yeah.
But the way it was for me, it was like, oh shit.
I'm supposed to have
this done by now.
It's felt like one long year since 2020 for me, honestly.
That's fair.
I mean, in all honesty, everything's, between, I was so loaded up. At one point we were between 3 houses and really like 4 remodels. We had the remodel at the California house, the remodel at the house that Sam bought, the remodel at the house here, and remodeling the shop, all at the same time. Money moving everywhere. It was a lot, and so much stress and not enough sleep and just a lot of,
grind set.
Yeah. And yeah, to a certain degree that was there. And when I got to the point where I started going full time for myself, there was a lot of that, but it was more like just excitement that I could. Mm-hmm. I was like, I can stay up and work till 2 if I want. I could start working at 1 p.m. and stop working at 2 a.m. because I can do whatever I want right now.
There's a weird freedom realization when you wake up like the week after you quit your job. And
I can drive somewhere and have lunch wherever I want today.
What time do I need to wake up?
Sure.
Doesn't really matter because I'm working till 10 o'clock anyway.
Yeah, I might be working till 10 or I can work for 1 hour today.
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want.
Or you go get lunch with somebody and it draws out to an hour and a half. Okay,
whatever. You got to go back to work. I sure
sucks.
don't. I think a really big grounding thing for me was the fact that I did have an employee prior to going full time, which is, I guess that maybe, I don't know how normal that is, but that had its own challenges.
That's probably fairly unusual.
Yeah. And so that was a very grounding thing for me of my employee is awesome and he's got such a strong work ethic. So I've got this guy who is showing up every day. Well, that means I've also got to show up every day. So there's not a lot of oh yeah, I'll see you at noon today.
I feel like most people, the pressure of quitting your job and you're going, I've got to support myself and my family. I've got to figure this. I have to figure this out because I have to do this. If I don't, I can't pay my bills. That's like enough pressure.
Yeah.
But I feel like you took on a little bit more.
Yeah.
To go, I actually have to support
pay his bills,
my employee.
Yeah.
And then myself.
Yeah. And it was really hard. And I would say the biggest things were like just all the unknowns after the newness kind of wore off and I was just in it and this is just my job. It was really hard on my relationship with Sam. That I wouldn't say it took a toll. There was just a lot more challenges, as far as understanding that it's not like a midlife crisis thing that I'm working out like as a new hobby. And I just needed a work break. Like I took on a new job and this is just it. And it's demanding in very different ways. Figuring out how to work with an employee where I'm really interacting with a lot more than I was when I was working 2 jobs kind of thing, right? When this is all I'm doing all day and I'm seeing how things are going and I'm a lot more hands-on with my employee.
You're working more side by side.
Yeah, I'm looking at stuff.
Pointing out the window and be like,
hey, I just need these things done by the end of the week. However you choose to, as long as you get them done, that's fine. If you mess up, that's understandable because I wasn't there to tell you how to do it and I'll fix it on the weekend, whatever. So it's more like, okay, I've got to really do processes and become a business owner, right? That was the big thing I don't think I became a business owner until months into being full-time with the job.
I still don't think I am.
Maybe not. No.
I really honestly don't consider myself a business owner.
Yeah. And so it was, I don't know, but there's been so much personal growth and so much good that's come from it. And it's been overall still now like probably the hardest thing I've done, school was hard and that was tough. And like, I've had some, challenges and, friends and other, partners,
school hard
relationships. For you? Not at first. And then yes, because I had a really easy time like K through 12. Freshman year was a breeze. I guess sophomore year was also a breeze, but then like the classes got real. Yep. And I had no study skills at all.
Same.
So I took my sophomore year twice. And I was like also learning how to like to be a young adult, so I just was like saying yes to like everything pretty much. Like, yeah, let's go do this and that. And school, I'll figure it out when I get around to it.
I feel like those last 2 or 3 for me and you.
Yeah.
Years of college were kind of like a great equalizer between, and I'm really just talking about, I guess, kids from high school who went to college and got like a standard 4-year degree. So in high school, you had kids that studied all the time.
Yeah.
And did well. 4.0 students, great. Didn't have a big social life.
They really worked for it.
Did all their homework, really worked for it. And then you had people, I was in the same boat as you. I never did homework in high school. I never brought work home.
Yeah, I was doing it at lunch.
Still doing, doing it at lunch or doing it in the morning before class or whatever. Still doing AP classes, still maintaining, a 3.5 or better.
Phoning it in. Yeah.
But it was just easy.
Sure.
High school was a breeze. I was able to go have fun, do everything I wanted to do, still make all my good grades. And I was like, I was on the honor roll and all that stuff, which is great. And then you get to college and freshman year, it's like, okay, cool. More of the same.
Still high school.
Sophomore year, you get into the classes that not everybody's taking.
Right.
And then you're like, whoa. So you get a little shook. And that sophomore year is like when you really, if you're partying, if you're socializing in college. Sophomore year is like, okay, I got my feet under me.
Yeah.
I've got seniority over somebody now.
Correct.
Let's go. Let's have some fun this year.
Yeah. You know what bars aren't too strict. You've kind of got it figured out.
I have a good fake ID at that point.
Yeah. Your friends, or in my case where you've looked 40 since you were 12, so yeah, I had,
but then to finish out that equalizer thought. So then you get into sophomore, junior year, you start getting into your core classes. And you go, oh, shit, I've actually got to study, not to do well. I've got to study to pass at this point.
Right.
And the kids who worked hard through high school
are cruising.
Never missed a beat. They're just doing the same. They're just doing the same thing they've always done, and they're doing well.
Yeah.
And you and I had to figure that out at that point. It was like, okay, how do we study?
Yeah.
And then so you got to learn all that. So then everything kind of level sets, and yeah, you had it easy, but you're paying for it now. And those kids are going, I mean, you just do the workbook, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine on the test, right?
Funny enough, I totally agree with that. And it's actually kind of made me think of like the business side of things too. Cause I think ironically, I've been working since I was, oh no, how long has that been happening? Oh, right. Pretty close. We'll still have the audio, technical difficulties. We're going to stand by while Luke resets the cameras, and then I'll move on to my next thought. Yeah. So funny enough, I've been working since I was 14, like paid by a company since I was 14. I worked at Blockbuster. That's how
Just
old
14,
I am.
really?
Yeah. You know, if you don't, yeah, you got soft hands, boy.
Yeah.
But I think I've always
semis at 8. I wasn't.
But I guess I've always had I've always been working. I always had a part-time job or something. I always liked earning money. And
did you like it or did you have to do it?
I liked it. Yeah, I really didn't have to until college, and even then I guess I didn't really have to. I just wanted to have more money than I had, so I guess I had to in that sense. So
sure.
And so when it came around to like getting jobs and stuff like that, I think that really helped me like after school, is that I wasn't like leaving college and entering the workforce where like study skills are great, but like so is the social aspect, and so is like knowing how to work. And so as soon as I got my foot in the door somewhere,
and I feel like engineering it really shines through, but you see the new hires, fresh out of college, who
wide-eyed
might have picked up an internship the last year of college in that field, but had never really had to sell mattresses or work at Best Buy. These are the things I did in college. Or work at a golf course. Or worked at a pharmacy back in high school. Stuff like that. You kind of see that they get into the workforce and they know everything that they need to know about their subject matter. But they kind of walk in and they're like,
well, not just that.
What is this job?
It's not even just the subject matter that they know. It's like, how does that company work, right? What's the culture there? What's their process for it? It might not be what you were taught in school. There's a lot that you weren't taught in school. So I would say
working with people.
Yeah. And I did my time in retail. I did my time in a restaurant. Those are the two jobs I think everybody should have, because I think you'll just learn how to work with the public in a very good way, of people from all walks of life.
Also pretty eye-opening if you have a, what do they call it? Rose-colored glasses.
Oh, sure.
About the general public. Work retail or restaurant, and you go, oh.
Well, and then you kind of see how wide of a spectrum there is for humanity. And then when you get and then I did my internships pretty much every summer in college, and so I got to see a lot of different engineering companies and how they work. So by the time I got into engineering, I was pretty well adept to just work. So it's kind of funny, like, while I wasn't the kid who had to like study hard, I don't know, I got lucky. I just I learned those skills in school. I learned how to study, and that kind of put your head down and figure it out kind of stuff. In undergrad, that was great, because when I got to grad school, at that point, by grad school, I'm a professional student. I know how to study. In grad school, the schooling was easy. There was some weird, there's weird drama in my graduate department that made things very difficult for me. But outside of that, it was kind of a breeze. So I had so much. I don't think there's ever been an aerospace engineering student who had more fun in grad school than I did. I had a fantastic time. It was great. I was in a big city doing it was a lot of fun.
I always thought of graduate school as you weren't really socializing. You kind of got a normal life. School is kind of like your nighttime job or something. It was just my idea of grad school.
For a lot of people,
I'm not ever gonna go.
For a lot of people, it was, and that caused some problems for me, because they're like, "Why aren't you just doing grad school all the time?" I was like, "Because I figured it out. I don't know what to tell you. I learned how to study, so I know how to do that now. I know I've just turned school into a game now, and I know how to play. Some people
got it like that.
Some people just good. So yeah, it was kind of it's all kind of geared towards this, I guess what I'm doing now, like you said as me earlier, there's a lot of stuff that I took from my school, my jobs, to kind of be able to feel like I have the ability to do this. And it hasn't been easy. It's been very hard. It's been challenging in ways that I expected, and then more challenging in way more ways that I hadn't expected. And there's been times where outside the benefit of like Samantha's helped me out financially a couple times, has paid a couple mortgage payments for me, and my parents have helped out with some financial things, borrowed some money from them.
Samantha's the fiance.
Correct. Yes. And so without some of that,
not a fiance at the time.
Correct.
So that's saying something.
Yeah. And so
she might be all right.
She's pretty good. She's pretty all right. I'm keeping her around for a bit. So without some of that financial help here and there, I would have fallen flat on my face.
Let me interrupt with an interview question.
Yeah.
What comes to mind? This is kind of a redundant way to ask a question, but what comes to mind when I ask the question?
What's your answer to the question?
Right. What's your answer to the question of what were some of those unexpecteds? Obviously, you have expected trials and tribulations, but what comes to mind when you think about the unexpected trials and tribulations?
I think one of the, and this is
because that's what we're here for.
Maybe it's such a weird response.
We want to give the people.
There's a lot of books I wish I had read earlier, just on how businesses run and how to operate and all that stuff. What I really didn't understand, and if you go back and listen to some of our earlier podcasts, you probably hear me asking certain guests these questions a lot, is just the relationship stuff. Mm-hmm. It was there was a lot of times where it felt like I had a lot of competing priorities between my business, my partner, my other projects with the house remodels, and I felt like I was spinning plates, and a lot of it was feeling like I was coming up short everywhere, in the same way that like I couldn't work 2 jobs at once. It's like, well, I got rid of one, but then I just took all that time that I got back and threw it all into one thing, and it's not like I lightened my load really at all.
Also bears mentioning that all of those things were young at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
The businesses were young. The multiple hats you were wearing were young. The relationship was fairly young.
Yeah.
So
that was,
they're all trying to kind of compete.
So feeling like I'm getting little wins here and there, but still feeling like I'm falling short on everything was really difficult to deal with.
And that can overshadow
anything. That's good. Yeah.
You have a big day, you take in some good orders, you get a good delivery install day or whatever.
And I come
That's
home,
all well and good. But if you come home and you feel like you're not doing your due diligence there, you're not giving enough attention there.
Right.
It sort of takes that whole feeling away from the day.
And it was a lot because, you talk to people who start a business while they're single and they would get it, or they start a business while they're married. There weren't many people or things I had seen on any kind of content or books or talking to folks, people who were like, oh yeah, I had a live-in girlfriend while I did this and everything was fine.
It was perfect.
Yeah. There was, to the fact that I joked that there needs to be like, with Sam, like there needs to be like I'm dating an entrepreneur anonymous kind of thing. Yeah. Not to mention just the way my brain works anyways as an engineer kind of, I think it already makes me difficult to date. So you're like, kind of like, I'm just compounding that with like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur now too. And just not really having any understanding of what that word means and what it meant to be a business owner in that capacity. And just trying to serve too many kings at once kind of thing. And so
now that we're queens,
that's right. Yeah.
Now that we're on video, we should kind of run back the couples episode, because I think that'd
be fun. Yeah.
I think that was really enlightening, and to the point you just made, it doesn't get talked about a lot. People talk about balance.
People shy away from it too.
People talk about balance and figuring out and all that stuff, but you don't, and maybe we just haven't found it, but you don't get a lot of content about the nitty gritty of, and especially, having like the episode where we had the girls on and it was like, well, how was that for you actually? And they were both honest.
Yeah. That's good. And
I think that's, I wish that we had heard more of that. It's not as much of a thing for me. Alex and I were married for several years. We were married almost 5 years by the time I pulled the trigger, and she was totally on board. There wasn't really a learning curve to it because we were kind of both learning it together. Mm-hmm. And we had already, like I said, been married long enough that it wasn't like, I guess you're kind of out of that romantic stage and that, like, I don't know, we had just settled into life together at that point, right? Yeah. And she was behind me.
She knows where she stands.
You
know where you stand. That's established.
Yeah. And she was so good about, if I got to work an 18-hour day, couple days in a row, or I got to work all the way through the weekend when we had something that we might have should have been to or whatever.
Sure.
Alex, the whole time, and I will always sing her praises on this, was just like, do it.
Yep.
I know that this is what you want to do. I trust that you're making the right decisions with your time and stuff. So I'm not a real good authority on that conversation because honestly, I had it pretty easy.
Yeah. And that's the thing is I really didn't know anybody who was. And so, and that's just something we had to figure out. And kudos to Sam. Like, she wasn't like busting my balls about it all the time. But it was just still like hey, I signed up to date somebody. I'd love for this to turn to a marriage thing. But if we're dating, I'd kind of like to feel like, we're dating still. Like, you're not just exhausted whenever I see you. We still go out and do something fun every now and then, that whole thing. And so that was probably one of the biggest ones that I just hadn't considered at all. And you hear these guys talk about like, oh yeah, she's so understanding when you do this and that. But I'm like, but what do they actually think though? Like, I know you're saying they're fine with it.
Right.
But I don't think they've always been fine with it.
Yeah.
And what did you have to do to change that? And so we've, date nights were a really big thing. We just established that there was one night a week that was a date night. We're going to go do something fun. We took turns planning it. That was a big thing that helped us. And then just open communication all the time. Of just like, hey, I'm feeling like I'm not getting enough attention. Okay. And figuring that out. And so it was just a time, and it's just a time to feel like, and even now I feel like I'm almost there as far as like stability goes. I'm closer than I've ever been, but it's felt like that for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I'll be able to know where that tipping point was until I'm there and I can look back.
You never did this, but I feel like it bears mentioning for anybody who's thinking about a similar path, is that at some point they're going to go, hey, I need some attention.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Sam said anything this way or Alex did, but I'm just breaking it down. At some point they're going to go, I need attention. You're giving this venture too much attention. You need to take some of that attention and put it on me because I'm gunning to be your life partner here.
Yeah.
So I do need that. And as a guy with tunnel vision on these goals that we have, your gut reaction is to go, well, like if she's really real about this, she's going to let me pursue this because this is my thing. This is what I want with my whole heart. This is what I'm driving for it. Right. And I don't think that that's the right way to approach it. I think as men, we also have to be able to say things are more important than your one solitary goal of starting and running a good business. Yeah. Like you do have to maintain other things.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't. Yeah. I mean, it's just, you have to, anything you're trying to do, you kind of have to go put the effort in to do. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I guess
you want it, or you want it or you don't. Right.
Yeah. And if you don't want, and if you can't do it, figure out how to do it all, well, then you're not going to do it all. And they're going to let you know, or your business is going to let you know, or your whatever's going to let you know. It'll figure it out. And like I said, I think that there's been a lot to be said about my drive and just tenacity to stick with it and stubbornness sometimes more than anything else.
I think you have to have that.
I mean, I go back, that's kind of how I was in grad school. I felt like I was being pushed out of my program by a postgraduate student who was actively like sandbagging me. And at some point I just said, I almost quit. And I was like, no, I'm just going to go figure this out and get it done. And then I'll put it behind me, And that's kind of what I had to do with this. There's a lot of just putting my head down and staying focused. And I learned a lot about discipline and a lot about focus and a lot about communication with a partner. I learned a lot about what I'm capable of actually doing, and I learned where my limits are and how to push past those sometimes and how to really, really respect those, my own personal limits sometimes.
I feel like one thing that you're really good at and that played a huge part in this part of your journey is seeking answers, is asking the questions, seeking out people who have done it before, and going, hey, how was this for you? Yeah. And not getting the Maker Hangs interview of how somebody started their business, but going, when you were at that point and you had your wife or girlfriend at home, like how did you do that?
Yeah.
And you brought that up, like you said, you brought that up a lot. With
I asked any one of our
maker
guests who was in a serious relationship with somebody.
And,
I was like,
and
tell
I
me
think
how
that
worked.
that proves a bigger point with you is that, and this is somewhere that I kind of falter, is that you're very willing to ask the questions and go, hey, you've been through this. I haven't. Please tell me everything. I'm going to absorb it all and take what I can.
Sure.
I've always been kind of the opposite, and I try to work on it, but I'm just haven't made a lot of headway. I'm not very good at it. Even in my engineering career, something would come up that I didn't know how to do. I was a young engineer, but I would act like I knew how to do it. Then I would go figure out how to do it on my own, because for some reason I didn't want anybody to know that I didn't know how to do things that I had no business knowing how to do, honestly.
Sure.
Because I'd never done them.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever taught me them, so it's totally believable that I don't know how to do it. But I have some sort of block there where somebody I'll be having a conversation with somebody, they'll tell me something, I don't really know what they're talking about, and I'll just go along with the conversation, and that's fine if you're making small talk. But if you're at work,
sure,
you got to ask questions.
I think I was that way to a certain degree in the engineering world. I think there's a certain amount in that world that kind of incentivizes pretending like you know more than you do.
I was always in circles that I was the least experienced.
Sure.
And maybe it's because I positioned myself as knowing more than I did, because I did that. I faked. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, or I can figure
for sure.
that out.
Yeah.
I found, I don't know where it happened, but especially, I'd like to think that I had some humility before I left my engineering jobs behind. But especially getting into this, it's very humbling. Like, it's just, you're doing it or you're not. And you can be doing everything right and it still not work. And it's a lot of hitting your head against the wall. And
all those social media around small business, I think exacerbates that, because it's a highlight reel just like everything else.
Sure.
So you look at it and you don't hear this nitty gritty. And a lot of that's why we do what we do with the podcast. Is you look at everybody online who's starting. I mean, even the guys who were starting, I'm doing air quotes, starting businesses, and everything works, and they lay out all their numbers. Here was the first house I flipped. Here was the first property I built and sold, and my profit was $250,000, and da 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 da. And there's no talk about the trials and tribulations. There's no talk about I didn't know if I was going to make my next mortgage payment. There's no talk about the loan ran out 3 months before we finished, and we needed $15,000 more.
I ate ramen for 3 months. My wife left me. My dog won't look me in the eye. But I sold that first house for a net profit of $200K. You know?
Yeah, and then I leveraged that into my multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah, so I opened another LLC. Yeah,
it ain't that, folks.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a very humbling experience, you know. And like, there's not really anyone in the room to compete with, you know. Either it's just me. And it's whatever I need it to be. And the needs are always pretty clear. At least for me, they were, or at least sometimes the needs weren't as clear as much as like, I know this isn't working, you know, and I can't figure out why.
I need this many dollars to come in, but only this many are coming in.
Yeah. Or just like,
so I need to change that.
Or just that gut feeling of like, I'm doing it wrong. Like I must be doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. I got very lucky meeting Chris at the grocery store, who, again, at that point, I was very open to just being like, as soon as we met, I messaged him like that night of like, I would love to meet with you and learn anything that you're willing to tell me, because I know I'm doing it wrong. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I just know that I've got a lot of the right pieces there, but they're not being put together in the right way, and I'm going to fail. And that's the last thing I want. And so I can either sit there and pretend like I can figure it out, or I can work 8 extra hours every day.
We really did kind of run into Chris at Publix.
Literally at a grocery store.
At the exact right moment of your journey.
Yeah. It was a...
Because what happens if we didn't run into Chris that day?
I don't know. It's tough.
And not to say that like it would have all fallen apart otherwise, but that kind of stemmed even just the thought process of I don't know that I'm doing this the best way.
I think before that I was, and that's one of the conversations we had. He's like, I've heard you guys talk about like you're doing it wrong. And
Yeah.
I agree. So let me
Like
tell
we
you.
knew we were doing it wrong, but we weren't quite sure how.
Yeah, yeah. And I wasn't really sure. I guess I'd like to think that I would have figured out, maybe not to reach out to him, but like figured something out or push pause on it or like said like, you know what? I need to push pause on this whole thing. I need to go get go back to engineering for a bit. Clearly I didn't do enough homework ahead of time.
I feel like the breaking point, and honestly now we're just into hypotheticals and really wasting time, but
Yeah.
I think the breaking point would have been you would have gotten your system set up and very efficient, and it was still not producing like it should.
Yeah.
And then you would have gone, okay, I've optimized all this, and I'm still not competing.
Right.
What are the competitors doing?
That's what I think.
Then you would have gone, hey, what are you doing? And Chris would have gone,
not that.
not that.
Yeah. Not that, my guy. Yeah. Yeah, so it's
Shout out Chris.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, and that
with Old Wood Custom Cabinetry in Huntsville, Alabama.
They do great work, and like again, I think the most impressive part of his business isn't just the quality of cabinets they produce; it's the quality of business they run, and that's kind of what I'm striving towards now. Is I can build boxes, I can put doors on them, and I can design them well, and I can work with clients well, and do all that stuff.
You look at their portfolio, and honestly, you're there now. You look at their portfolio and the things that they're putting out, and you go, okay, this is a big cabinet company, right? They got a lot of guys, they got a big team, they got girls in the office they got people in the office, they got secretaries and stuff. You're like, this is your assumption of the business. And now you look at your stuff, the stuff you're putting out looks like you got way more than 2 people. Looks like you got way more than 3 years of experience. Doesn't look like it's out of a
1,000 square foot detached shop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what it is just you're doing it right. You're using the right systems. You're managing right. And you can have a very leaned out process. When we went and toured their facility, it was like there's not that much extra stuff here.
Yeah, nothing extra.
But they're putting out what they're putting out. And same with you. If you look at the stuff that you're putting out and then you come to this shop, you're going to go,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the trick here? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's awesome. I love that.
No, it's been really, since we changed our whole processes to kind of mirror what professionals are doing right now, which of course makes sense, right? Best practices are best practices for a reason. Since we started using more best practices and more industry standards, things have gotten a lot easier, a lot less stressful. Not easier is not the right word. They've gotten a lot less stressful. And it's allowed me to take that energy and time that I've gotten back to put towards other things and develop the business more. We actually...
and like your throughput goals become realistic.
Yeah.
Because I feel like before you were really on that system, you had throughput goals, but they were almost always unattainable.
It was impossible to do business the way I was before.
Right.
Without going out. Now, the other option would have been I take out some massive loan. I go hire some people with more experience. Maybe they tell me to do things differently, or I just get people in here who can really operate efficiently and well in a shop without as much direction, and I can kind of do that. But again,
there goes your whole margin.
Right. There goes a lot of margin.
It still doesn't make sense.
Right. And so I've been able to bootstrap a lot more with starting with this different thing and just being open to making that switch, right? Like, again, with that, not just asking the questions, but like, I know I'm doing it wrong. Someone says, you should try this. And me go, this is better. I'm changing this overnight. We're doing it now. Full send. And if that had happened like 3 months prior, I don't know if I'd been like, well, let me look into it, this and that. At this point, At that point, I was very much like, I think anything is better than how I'm doing it. I'm very open to learning anything I can. That's been a big thing, is just, what I've learned is like, you've got to have the discipline and the grit and all that Instagram soundbite stuff, right?
You do have to have that.
I think you've got to have a certain.
You got to be willing to put in the sun up to sundown days.
They're going to have to happen sometimes, but you also have to be willing to figure out how to not have to do those all the time.
Yeah, it's a little deeper than that.
Because other things in your life demand your attention, hopefully. I don't
know. There's a beautiful simplicity to the folks who just do like
I
their
don't want that
business is their life.
I don't want that
They
life.
might have video games or whatever, but like Jarrett out in Ardmore,
Yeah.
Jarrett Woodworks, I feel like he's a lot like that. His life, and I don't mean this offensive. I'm a huge fan of the guy. I feel like his life is pretty simple.
Sure.
He doesn't have a lot going on. He likes his video games.
Sure.
So that's what he does in the evenings. But outside of that, it's spending time with his wife, and it is doing his business. And that's it.
I think
that there's kind of a beautiful simplicity to that.
Sure.
That's not me. Like, I feel like he doesn't do vacations. He doesn't care to travel. He doesn't care to buy new things. He doesn't care
I like
about
the
anything.
simplicity of the farmer's life, right? Like,
It's
I'm gonna
like
wake
that.
up,
He's just
I've
a
got
cabinet guy
I've got
or a
hard,
furniture guy.
I've got
yeah.
hard work to do. I'm going to go do it. I'm tired at the end of the day. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to do it again tomorrow, and I'm just going to keep doing that. There's some appeal to that. What doesn't sound appealing is these coked out dudes on Instagram who are just like, I worked 32 hours yesterday. You know?
There's one clip that went viral.
I squeeze a can of C4 straight into my eyes.
There's
every
one
morning.
clip
Yeah.
that went viral, and it went viral out of satire. But there's some dude who's talking about basically putting 3 days into one day. I've time hacked the first 6 hours of my day. That's my first day.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
My
yeah.
6 hours, I do a whole day, and he goes through his routine. Next 6 hours are the next day. Next 6 hours are the next day, and then I get 6 hours of sleep. He's like, I just got 3 days and 6 hours of sleep in when you got 1 day in.
Yeah.
And you're like,
I've met people like that.
that
and
can't be
they're-
true.
I've met people who are close to that, and that they're horrible.
But it can't actually be true.
It's also not true. No, they're selling something, right?
Nobody does that.
Yeah.
You're selling, and if you sign up for my class, I'll teach you how to do the same thing.
If you do exactly what I say, you will make so much money and die at 42 from a heart attack. You know, your second ex-wife won't talk to you, and you will still die of a heart attack.
But if you want to make it to 60, you cold plunge every day.
That's right,
3
cold
minutes
plunge,
every
3
day.
minutes.
Use my coupon code.
That's right.
10% off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to work myself to death. I'm trying to create a sustainable
I'm trying to
life.
create it. Honestly, I love working. I love grinding. I love getting it. I
Yeah.
love building shit. I love making shit. Ultimately, the goal for me right now
Yeah.
is by 40, I want to have enough passive income to not have to do anything.
That's where I'm at. You know, I would say, and that kind of goes back to like why am I doing this? You know, I realize that especially at this part of my life,
You're probably getting pretty close to 40. What do you?
I'll be
you 40?
37.
Are you
37.
40?
No, God, get out. I'll be 37 in February.
You could just say I'm 36.
That sounds closer.
That sounds
to
way
40.
better.
Yes, I'm only 36. I'm a young kiddo. You know. No. I realized that this is kind of like my last chance to do something like this and really kind of put all my chips in and see what happens.
It's not, but I feel like it's good to think that way.
Yeah, it's not, but it's one of those things like I didn't hate my engineering job. I didn't hate being an engineer. I really liked it. It's just that it wasn't giving me what I wanted for it. And the purpose of me being there was just like, great, it pays well and I don't hate going there. Cool.
I feel like we are both pretty spoiled in our quit our real job to go
Yeah, for
into
sure.
business for ourselves because we left great jobs with the door wide open.
Yep.
Could go right back.
Yep.
Worst case scenario, I go back to a job that I didn't hate and I was making good money.
Right. And so that was my thing of like, that's kind of like my golden net, right? Of like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to give it all that I've got. And if it works out, great. I'm doing something that I love, that I'm willing to give so much of my energy to, that it's really mine, that I've created and I've got something. And I can do that before I have a family and kids, and they can grow up with that and not be there for the struggle part of it, right? And I can have the time with the family that I want to have, you know, and be home when I want to be home and go on the trips and stuff and come home like without the bullshit kind of thing, right? And just be like, come home and like, oh, Dad's in a great mood every day.
Yeah.
Why? It's because Dad loves what he does. You know, this is the best. You know, it doesn't mean I have to make tons of money. It just means that I had to like something that's sustainable for the lifestyle that I want, you know, and I like to think that I can make a bunch
Which is
of money
a lot
doing
of
that.
money.
It's so much money, you know, but like I also
I don't have to make a lot of money. I just want to make enough to sustain the lifestyle that I live.
which requires
requires
a lot of money. So
money.
much money. But this is something I talked to Sam about.
Mostly plane tickets.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's something I talked to Sam about of like, it's not like I'm going to keep trying to make this work for forever if it's not working. Like it's so hard and it's so much that at some point, if it wasn't working, I'd probably just throw in the towel and be like.
So it's a great time for the question that I was kind of saving for
Yeah.
the end of the conversation, because I think about this a lot.
Yeah.
If the day came where you went, okay, wood and plane ain't it.
Yeah.
We're shutting the doors. Where do you see yourself going? Because I think about it from a resume perspective. I think about, okay, if I had to get back into the workforce, what skills can I really flex? Most of the skills that I can flex at this point are not engineering centric. Yes, I have an engineering degree, but I've also lost a lot of that knowledge. I've lost a lot of that skill set.
Sure.
So do I try to leverage some of my woodworking? Do I try to work with, I've always talk about it a lot, want to get into timber framing
Sure.
in some way, even if it's just spend 6 months on a crew.
Yeah.
To kind of get, but if that day came where you went, okay, this is not doing it, and I do have to go work for some
movie recording has been stopped automatically.
We got an hour.
Yeah, we just crossed over. Yeah, we're gonna go reset the cameras again.
We got to figure that out.
This is a song for the audio folks to keep you, I guess for the video folks too, to keep you occupied while you can't see us. This is Splinters and Stuff. All right, and we're back with a quick clack for video number 3. This is gonna be so much fun to edit. Can't wait.
Yeah, that wasn't a good clap.
That'll work. Okay, so if I had to get back into, for me, it's
Just
different.
working for somebody else.
I'd go right back to engineering.
Yeah.
In that field, and I'd probably at least start there. But where I left wasn't exactly a strong technical role. I mean, I went straight out of school and kind of had more, not direct leadership, but just kind of management, more people-centric roles. I wasn't the guy like figuring out what thread needs to be on a screw. I was more big picture stuff, more.
Yeah. I feel like that's easier to fold back into.
Yeah, and so I was more at the strategy level than the tactical level of things. And I think that the skills I've learned from this would translate really pretty well back to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be looking at program management jobs, things like that. Like the fact that I can manage all the stuff I'm doing now between the sales and the budgeting and ordering and working and process development and all this stuff. It's stuff that I was able to take from that environment and apply here and really hone some. So I feel like going back, it'd be like, I can run circles around your people. Like these people have done one of these things and you've had to tell them how to do it. I ate or didn't because of how I did these things. And
so
so
it's like the people in those positions currently learned all those skills on a rubric through your program management classes.
Sure.
They worked their way up. They had a program manager boss. They did that, and they just kind of learned it as they went.
Yeah.
They didn't learn it as...
And their pay was the same whether they did an okay job or a great job. And there's not a lot of room to do an okay job.
They didn't learn under pressure.
Under duress, you know? And so I feel like that would be my thing. It wouldn't be like, I've already been successful in business to me. You know, the fact that I've made it past the 1 year mark as a small business, that's what, 10% of businesses, only 10% of businesses do that. I've maintained
something like that.
I not only maintained my relationship with the person who I love dearly, but we're getting married now. That was hard. That was super hard. I've never missed a paycheck for my employee. He's always been paid what he's supposed to make on time, every time. That is a big deal to me.
I think that is big enough that if it did all fall apart, you can hang your hat on the fact that you paid an employee a livable wage for multiple years.
Yeah. Yeah. Mac has worked for me longer than I've ever worked for anyone else.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I haven't even worked full time for Wood and Plane as long as Mac has, you know, and the fact that I have left my mark in this area. There's people who have things that I think are beautiful that I made with my hands or with my mind.
Now we're getting too far into this hypothetical.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
But there's I feel good about everything I've already done.
So you think you would go back into engineering?
that's at least where I would start, I think. And then I think I'd really be keeping my eyes open for
Say
other
you had
things.
enough time to think about it. It wasn't like, okay, I've got to start getting a paycheck. If you've got, say you got 6 months to figure it out.
Oh, gosh. That's too big. I don't know. I really don't. I mean, even then.
I think about it all the time is like, what would I do next? What would I get into next? Would I try something risky? Would I go into like some real estate, flips ventures, whatever, to try to make it work? Or would I go back and try to get a W-2? I don't know.
I think if this wasn't working, the stress that would come with that would push me directly to just be looking for the warm embrace of a regular paycheck.
Get that check, reset, breathe for a bit, and then figure it out. Maybe, and that's what I was saying before about like, I'm not going to trust forever. And like me wanting to have a family and stuff, like at that point, it's like, if anything, I'd just be really picky about where I went. Right. Are you guys like, cracking whips over here? Or is this like a nice collaborative environment where, I guess the feelings I was feeling when I left engineering was this like, a 1990s engineering company, or is this
do I get to
2020s?
Does my voice get heard when I feel like, when it like makes sense to, right? Like, I don't think my voice should always be heard, but like, do I get to do the role you hired me for?
Has everybody in charge here been here for 20 years?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not where you want to be.
Or like, are creative ideas welcomed in the right setting? Is there a right time and place for me, period? Or is this you are a cog and you will do as you do? I don't want to do that. Like, I got into engineering because I wanted to be creative and solve complex problems and innovate and do all this stuff. And I'm finding with what I'm doing now, I'm really able to do that.
That's probably why I would not go back into engineering.
Yeah, I mean, I'd want to find that, or maybe I would start my own engineering company. I don't know. I think if things weren't working out with this, I would go get that paycheck, reset, and go from there. And then who knows? Maybe after, maybe say this is 5 years from now, right? Or a year from now. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's at that point, it's like, I'm like, oh man, this sure is nice that I get to like hang it up at the end of the day. I'm driving home and I used to take work mentally home with me. I don't think I would ever do that again, working for somebody else. It'd be like, see ya. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas
I never did. And I always tried to reason with people who did.
Yeah. It's like, well, I'm not paying you to think about it at home.
I work with folks and I have some friends who bring it home, and it's like, they don't exist for you.
Yeah.
You shouldn't exist for them.
Yeah.
When you go home for the day, now if you have a remote job or you're on call or whatever, you got to be tuned in. But I worked manufacturing. If you're not in that plant, if you're not at that shop, you can't do anything. I can't log into my system remotely. I can't do any of that. So when I walked out that door, even in times of duress at work, just stressed out, I got way more to do in a day than I can do.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm underperforming. There were certainly times that I did underperform. My boss was like, hey, you're not doing enough. You're not doing good enough.
Yeah.
Even in those times, it was like I had the logistical reasoning to understand that when I walked out of those doors, there's nothing else I could do. I'm not going to learn tonight whatever's going to fix the problem at work. I'm going to be with my wife. I'm going to enjoy myself, and I'm going to suck it up when I walk through the door the next morning and figure it the fuck out.
Yeah.
So I never really did that, but I know that I'm kind of in the minority there.
Yeah, I don't know what it was for me that made me feel that way. It's just
I think most people.
You have
an obligation.
I think I'm just a little sensitive too to certain things like that, where I feel like I'm letting people down, and or they're figuring out that I'm like some kind of fraud or something. And I don't want people to think that, or whatever it might be. Like
that was me stemming from that acting like I know what I'm doing. When I actually have no idea.
Yeah, so that's
my life though.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think it'd just be different. Maybe I'd take a more remote job, so I could kind of like be like, hey, we're gonna live in New York for a month, and I'm gonna work remote there, and then I'm gonna work remote. I think I'd probably want to do that, if anything.
I like to think about it from an exciting standpoint.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, okay, this isn't working. I'm putting a bow on it.
Yeah.
And what do I want to do next? And I've got enough, and you do too, got enough equity in different things, places where if you decided that, you could move some money around, sell an asset, give yourself a year, 6 months.
Sure.
Enough seed money to do whatever you wanted to do next.
Yeah.
What's it gonna be?
That's
where
where
my
sorry to
mind
disappoint you.
wanders
It's
a
just
lot.
me getting
I'm
a
just
cushy
going
job,
back to
baby.
work, baby.
Well, it's tempting. You know, I've got a lot of friends that, you know, hey, you know, if you're ever interested in coming back, we could do that. I mean, I still get it's hard being a engineer in America these days. They're just everywhere you go. I can't go anywhere without being offered a job, you know, and especially in this town.
Yeah,
And
to anybody listening, if you have any aspirations to be an engineer, do it and come to Huntsville. You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. And the amount of money people are throwing around right now for that kind of work is insane.
Yeah.
And like, which is great. Like, workers, go get that money, right? And strong middle class, let's build it up, you know. And so there's times where, like, you know, say I'll come home, you know, they're hiring this person at work. I'm like, what do you think the pay band is for? She's like this. I'm like, I could throw my name in that hat and come home with. And phone it in, you know, and leave it at work and
There's
be fine.
Folks I used to work with are now making 45% more than I was making when I left. And I'm like, whoa. And certainly more than I'm making now.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, that does sound nice. But then I go back to how I felt every day. I was like, this ain't it.
Yeah, so
I have to remind myself of that.
What would really suck is if I went back and then immediately felt that way again. Which all that would mean to me is I picked the wrong place to go to, right? Like, I think that would be my thing. I'd be really picky about where I went, and really true to myself of like, if I interview, like, hey, like, here's my expectations. If I start feeling like this is like, I'm going to hold up my end of the deal. You guys are selling me on this. You hold up your end of the deal. As long as we're both holding up the deal, great. And if it stops, then I'm out.
I think I've gotten so spoiled on the lifestyle and the freedom that it'd take like 200 G's to get me back to working for somebody, and I do not have the skills or resume to warrant 200 G's, so it ain't happening.
Yeah,
that's why my mind is like, all right, what would I try to figure out next?
Yeah, no, I guess I feel that sense of freedom. But it's different because it's not a solo gig. I have an employee to look out for. You know, it's one of those things of, you know, now if he went off and took another job and it was just me, well, then maybe I'd be thinking differently. Then it's a lot more freedom, right? Then it really is, I'm only beholden to myself. But I'd probably just immediately go hire somebody else.
Well, I mean, you would have to.
Yeah. And so
you would have to restructure your entire world not to.
Right. And so it's, I don't know. I'm just so, again, focused on, like, there is not a next thing for me right now. Like, right now, like, I wake up every day thinking, how do I go make this work better? You know, and and I think that's been the biggest change. And, is really that I went from the technical aspect, the hobbyist side of it. And then I learned managerial skills with my employee. And the whole time I thought I was an entrepreneur because I just had my own business. But I would say that that's really what I've been working towards this year and more recently is like you know, keeping your eye on the ball and trying to look ahead all the time, but not like what's after. It's just my what's after is like, how do I do this next job better? Is there a way I could you know, shave time off this process? Is this efficient? Do I have the right tools for this? Do I have too many tools?
Yes.
You know, yes. At this point I do.
You've always had too many tools.
Yeah, well, they're fun to have, you know.
That's
and so it's so my eye on the prize mentality has really shifted, and it's just like there's numbers I want to hit that means I'm sustainable, and I'd like to feel like that's happening consistently for a certain amount of time, and then breaking that down into, okay, how do I, like, my goal right now is I want to hit $30,000 in sales a month. If I do that,
give me broad goals for the next 12 months, and then we'll wrap this sucker up.
Sure. Broad goals next 12 months really is to hit that minimum $30,000 every month for 12 months.
Revenue.
Just gross sales.
Yeah.
That means I'm getting paid a reasonable salary. My employee's getting paid a reasonable salary. I'm putting money away towards debt. I'm putting money away towards capital expense. I'm able to pay rent on my own shop. I'm doing everything the right way.
Yep.
And that's not those aren't big growth numbers. That's just sustainable for the way I'm doing business now. A very comfortable sustainability. Things are fine, right? With the way my process is now, that probably puts me at about 50 to 60% capacity for what the shop's able to do in output, which is great. The fact that I can do that and be comfortable at 50% capacity, 50, 60% capacity means I have a big choice. And I can enjoy that freedom, right? That if like nothing has to, like my employee can get paid for 2 weeks and kind of sit on his butt and it wouldn't matter. Or I can now jack up my throughput, really push sales and marketing. And so that's kind of my next thing is when I feel like I've got maybe, and I'm working on that growth aspect of it. I've got that extra capacity now, but it's really hitting those basic numbers and developing a system to kind of like a sales funnel that brings that in consistently. So I've joined like the Builders Association. I'm trying to work with builders. And so that's one. And then I guess my next goal would be I'd love to clear $500,000 in sales in a year. And I think with the way I'm doing things now, that's not a capacity issue. It's really a sales and marketing thing. If I did $30K a month, that's $360,000 in a year. So it's really not that big of a leap.
Not that far off.
It's not that far off.
And if that's 60% capacity, then it works out.
Yeah, 60%. Yeah, 60% capacity, $360K in a year, I think is doable. I think that $500,000 in a year is very doable, and that means I'm bringing in another person, and that's when I'm starting that growth thing. So that's I've gone from the survival mode at the very bottom beginning of business to really I'm just kind of touching on stability and feel like I have been for a while. Sir Thrive, Sir Thrive Grindle,
Yeah.
And now I'm in that. I've been bumping up against
Sir
that.
Thrival Grindle britches.
I like it. That's good. I've been bumping up against that stability bracket for a while now, and I feel like I'm almost there where I can comfortably where I'm not waking up going like, "Where's my money going to be next month?" Where it's just like, it's fine. It's just this is just it runs. It's fine. And then
that's dangerous too.
It is, but that's also when I know my decision isn't going to be okay. Let me back off the gas pedal a bit.
Yeah, that's
cool.
enough.
It's fine.
That's
I'm gonna go. All right, time to mash that thing back down again, and see how I can get it to grow from there.
Time to put that pedal to the floor, baby.
Yeah, and so I would
6 to 6, sun up to sundown.
Yeah,
don't quit. No
so
days
yeah,
off.
I think
Saturdays,
I'd like to
working. Sundays working.
I'd like to pay off some of my short-term debt before the year is out, before a year from now, and I think I'm on a good path for that if things keep going the way they are. So yeah, I would say $30K a month every month for let's say 6 months. That would make me feel like I'm stable. Hitting $500,000 in sales over a 12-month period, that would make me feel like I'm ready for growth, and if not already having to do things to grow. And then paying off some short-term debt would be pretty good. And then building up a somewhat of a slush fund, just an emergency fund for the business. So whether just anything happens, I'm not screwed, so that's kind of it. So those are kind of boring, but that's what they are,
I mean, that's standard.
It's just good business. Yeah.
I feel like maybe you should throw in getting married in there.
That's already happening.
You are engaged.
It's not really a goal. It's
just schedule.
Just happening, I'll be there.
You'll get that done.
Yeah, I'll get that done.
Yeah,
that's
at the very
check.
least.
Yeah. I'll be there. If she wants to show up, that's her thing.
It's up to her.
It's up to her to figure out. But yeah. So yeah, I guess that's me. I hope I was fun to talk to.
That was fun. I feel like most of my questions and stuff felt leading because I knew the answers.
Sure,
but that's what it is.
It'll be the same and opposite next week. Yeah. So, all right. Well,
that was fun though. Now everybody knows Anthony.
Yeah, that probably gives you a pretty good. I feel like that's a pretty good overall sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Me. Yeah,
I think so. I feel like you came across as a little less risk averse than you actually are.
I don't know. I've always.
It's a learned trait.
Yeah, I would say
to not give a shit.
To what?
To not give a shit about some things.
Some things, yeah. It's just learning what things you have to give a shit about, what things you don't. I think is. What do they say? You got to learn how to follow the rules first, so you can learn which rules you can bend and which rules you can break, kind of thing. So yeah. I think that's I think the overall life journey. Maybe we're all on. So all right. Well, I guess. All
right. So
yeah,
that's it. For this episode. I hope everybody enjoyed. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Really, really appreciated you taking the time out to to give us your story, and I'm sure a lot of folks are going to learn a lot from what you had to say.
Good, I hope so.
At the end of every episode, we like to end up with sort of a tagline we've come along with. Yeah. We gave it to you before the show, so if you want to wrap us up, I'll cue you up now. Go ahead.
Don't talk for too long. That was what you told me. That was the note before the show. Is that right? The tag? Oh no.
No, here. Let me send it to you
on
a chat.
Yeah. Let me. Just start cutting wood.
Hey, you got it right.
All right.
Most times we send it to somebody and they go, "Just cut wood."
Just cut that wood.
Like,
yeah.
That's not it.
That's funny. All right. Well. Okay. Bye.
Enjoyed it, folks.